I'm going to present. Okay. So in the interactive notebook, I'm going to start with slide 1. Slides 1 and 2 were the first part for this week. And so that's really using this PhET simulation. So if you click on the title and go to the website, you'll click play. So the introduction is slide 1. The game has to do with slide 2. Okay. So the introduction, you want to make sure you turn on where it says tools, you want to turn on this balance. Okay. So you'll notice it says make ammonia, separate water, combust methane. On the slide, there's make ammonia, separate water, combust methane. And so you'll see there's a place for the balanced equation that looks a lot like this. There's 2 boxes with an arrow right here in the particle view. And then there's a balance view that looks like these balances up here. So essentially, once you balance an equation on here, you're going to make that row match what the screen looks like. Okay, so start with one of everything, and then say, okay, I have more nitrogen on my reactant side than on my product side. So I'm gonna add some nitrogen. All right, now I have 2 of each, but my hydrogens are really off. So I'm gonna add more hydrogen on my reactant side. And then once it's balanced, it has a happy little yellow smiley face. So at this point, I'm gonna say, okay, I found my coefficients for my balanced equation. It's 1, 3, and 2. So you would change this to a 1, 3, and 2. The particle view, you want to make it look like these 2 boxes. And so you would use these particles up top and you would drag and drop them. Okay. To that. If you run out of whatever particle, if you need H2 or whenever you get to the balance view where you're trying to make them match these balances up here, and I will put the disclaimer, they're not the same color, I'm sorry. But if you need more hydrogen by the time you get to here, you need more oxygen, all you need to do is right click and do a copy and paste, and that'll make some more of the little circles for you to be able to move. Okay, so this slide, once you're just getting to where you have it balanced on the PhET simulation, and then making the row look the same. Okay, so slide 2, first part's the game. So on your PhET simulation, once you've done all 3 of these, I'm gonna go to the game. I explain balancing equations like riding a bike, right? If you're explaining someone how to ride a bike, it looks a lot like you start pedaling and you just get there, right? You keep going. Eventually, I promise you'll get it. And so balancing equations is exactly the same. I can tell you, you want to look at, save oxygen and hydrogen for last. Do everything else first. But really to start to be okay with balancing equations, you just have to practice. And so the game, you're going to do all 3 levels, which is just each level has 5 questions. And so you're just working them out and you're saying, okay, I have 3 oxygens here. I have 2 here, so I need more of these. Well, now I have 4 oxygens, but I have 2 carbons. All right, so I'm going to check it. That's balanced. Okay, so this is just a visual way for you to practice balancing and saying, Okay, and you're trying to see that you have the same amount of each element on each side. All right, so here I have 2 of the red ones, which are oxygen, 2 of the oxygens. I have 4 hydrogens, 4 hydrogens. So this is just a way to practice visually seeing that. You should do all 3 levels because the practice is good. Okay, some of them are tough, but with this, I'm just having you do the practice. You're not having to drag and drop anything or put it anywhere. This is simply to help you practice, essentially like riding a bike. It's to practice, practice, practice. When you get here to the practice, you you're going to fill in numbers. So you're doing these on your own. And I'm going to make a video. I need to find the document camera. I'm going to make a video of me working through and showing you how I physically do these on paper. After I get done going through the slides, and I will also post that in Google Classroom so you can see it. But this is independent practice done on your own. Okay, so this is not part of the game. But you're just putting the numbers, the coefficients here. So that's slide 2. So that's balancing equations. So once we hit slide 3, which is really where today is supposed to start, but if you're not there, that's fine. You'll get there. Has to do with the review of dimensional analysis. All right, so dimensional analysis is just conversion between different units. So we actually use it a lot in everyday life that you may not think about it. And you may not do it as structured as dimensional analysis is done. But like if I'm trying to figure out like, okay, so I'm having a birthday party, I'm gonna have 30 people come over, how many pizzas do I need? Okay, if each person eats 2 slices and each pizza has 8 slices, and you're thinking through problems like that in the real world, that's actually just dimensional analysis. All right, you're trying to figure out how many things you'll need by converting different units, okay? So slide number 3 is really to think through how to set these problems up. That's all this is doing. We're not adding numbers yet, so that your units will cancel out. Okay, so just a reminder, if I want to cancel my units out, if I have something on top that I want to cancel out, I need to put the corresponding unit on the bottom for my conversion factor. So these things right here are conversion factors. All right, so something like 1 pizza has 8 slices. I'm talking about the same quantity, the same amount of pizza, but I have different units, right? A whole pizza versus slices. If I have 4 quarters and I have a $1 bill, that's the same amount of money. It's just different units, right? So these kinds of things are things that are equal. 1 mile, 5,280 feet. That's the same distance, they're just different units. So if you have a conversion factor, those are 2 equivalent values. So in terms of the fraction, you want to think about it like you would something like 4 over 4, right? I can have 4 over 4 this way, or I could flip them, and I'd have 4 over 4 this way. They're both equal to 1 because they're both equivalent values. So the same is true for conversion factors. They can be this way, or you can flip them where the fish is on the top, the gator's on the bottom, and that would still be the same value, 4 over 4 type of thing. Okay, so when you're setting these problems up, you're going to start with whatever it is, so flies, and you want what it's starting with by itself with nothing underneath it. Okay, so if I'm starting with flies, I'm going to go and find the card that has flies by itself on top. I'm going to drag it here. Okay. Then I'm going to people. So with this one, I went from fish to gators, and that was just 1 step. So I'm going to go say, okay, maybe I can go from flies straight to people. I see flies to frogs, flies to frogs. Okay, so apparently my next step is I'm going from flies to frogs. And I have my conversion factor, so 3 flies to 1 frog, written 2 ways, where they're on bottom and top and flipped. All right, so if I have flies on top, I'm going to pick the card that has flies on bottom because I know I want to cancel that unit out. So flies are on top, flies are on bottom. Now I have frogs. I'm still trying to get to people. I'm going to say, okay, I can go frogs to fish, frogs to flies. I already did that, so I don't need to do that. Frogs to birds, frogs to fish. Okay, well, I see I can go fish to people, so I'll go frogs to fish. So I have it where the frog is on the top or the frog is on the bottom. And since what I currently have is the frog on the top, my next conversion factor, I want to make sure that the frog is on the bottom. So I can cancel that out. So flies on top, flies on bottom, frog on top, frog on bottom. So the last step I have my fish on top. All right. And I'm trying to get to people. So I have it where the fish is on top or the fish is on bottom. Since my fish is on top here, I want to make sure my fish is on the bottom. So it cancels out. Flies on top, flies on bottom. Frog on top, frog on bottom. Fish on top, fish on bottom. I know that seems really redundant, but I want you to get in that mindset that if it's on the top, the thing that's the same goes on the bottom whenever you go to the next part, okay, to help cancel it out. And the pictures may seem silly, but I hope it helps. So for number 3 on this one, which we'll do in later, you get to make up however you want to do it. You can reuse one of these cards. You can start with flies or start with fish. I want it to be 3 steps. So like number 2 is 3 steps. I want this one to be 3 steps. But you don't necessarily have to go to people or gators or whatever. You can make it go how you want it to be. I just want it to be 3 steps where you're doing something on top, something on bottom, something on top, something on bottom, something on top, something on bottom. Okay, so that one is up to you to make it how you want. Just a reminder that this first card needs to have something on the top all by itself. Okay, so slide number 4. So if you have any questions, just write them down, because at the end we're going to come back and I'll answer your questions. So slide number 4 is the first step for it will be exactly like slide 3, where you're setting up your cards, something on top, something on bottom, something on top, something on bottom. Okay. So for number 1, I'm going from fish to bird, and it tells me I'm using the frog. So I have fish on top. If I'm using the frog, I want to find fishes and frogs. So I found fish and frog here and fish and frog here. Okay, so if I have fish on top, I'm going to use the card that says fish on bottom. Okay, so fish on top, fish on bottom. Frog on top, I'm trying to go to birds. So frogs and birds. Oh, here they are. So if I have frog on top, I want the card that has frog on bottom. Okay, so the next step, so the card setting up is exactly the same. Only difference is that you're going to put the amount above it. So I have 4 fish, so I'm going to put a 4. I have 1 frog, put a 1. 1 bird, I'll put a 1. On the bottom, this is blank, so I'm going to leave this blank. I have 1 fish, so 1. 2 frogs, I'm going to put a 2. Okay, so whenever you're solving a dimensional analysis problem, once you get the units right and you have the numbers in the right spot, the steps are you multiply across the top. So 4 times 1 is 4. You multiply across the bottom. So 1 times 2 is 2. Then your last step is you divide. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. So all of your dimensional analysis problems are going to have 2 parts to your answer. It's going to have your number, and it's going to have your units, right? You just went through all this trouble to set up and make sure that all of your units are canceling out the way that they need to. And so I'm going to say I have 2 birds. That's my answer. Okay. I always like to think about my answers, because if I did something kind of weird, like maybe I divided and I said 2 divided by 4 instead, and instead of 2 I got an answer of half, I'd say, okay, would 4 fish feed half a bird? Does that answer make sense? Maybe not. So you want to have that last step. Instead of just doing the math, you want to have that final step that says, okay, does this make sense? And that's a good way to check it. I'm going to correct number 2. All right, so you might want to do this on your slide. So erase the question. If you have 4 fish, how many birds will that feed? Say, oh. Okay. So this time, you're going to go from fish to, hang on, let me think about this. to birds. We just did that. Not that one. No, do that one. Fish to birds, but I want you to use fish to bird. But this time, instead of using the frog, I want you to use the gator. Okay? So if you have, I'm going to say 4 fish, how many birds will that feed? Okay, but this time you're definitely using the gator. And if you want, you can move this card down. That's fine. Or you can use this card that has the 1 fish by itself. Because remember, when you're starting, you want something on the top with nothing on the bottom. You just need to note that in here, you're going to put a 4. Okay, that's the important part. Because you want 4 fish. All right, so number 2, you'll come back and do. So again, if you have questions about this slide, go ahead and jot them down. I'm going to move on to slide number 5, where it really is setting up dimensional analysis problems. Okay, I'm going to space these out so that the numbers are a little bit, the boxes are bigger. Okay, so I'm going to work numbers 1 and 3 because number 3 is a little more complicated. Actually, I'm just going to work number 3. Number 1's pretty easy, so I'm going to let y'all do 1 and 2. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do number 3. Okay, so how many grams of MgCl2 are in 0.0056 millimoles of MgCl2? The molar mass of MgCl2, or magnesium chloride, is 95.21 grams per mole. Okay, so whenever you're approaching a dimensional analysis problem, your first question is, what am I starting with? What is my given? All right, you want to put that here. So a lot of problems are going to have more than one number, and you're only putting one of those numbers there. So here's my tip. All right, if you have a number, you're looking for the number that has 1 unit behind it. All right, so 0.0056 millimoles, that's 1 unit. 95.21 grams per mole, that's 2 units. All right, so if it has 2 units, in my mind, that tells me that's a conversion factor. Okay, so I'm going to put 0.0056 millimoles. That's what I'm starting with. All right, the second question I'm going to ask myself is, what am I trying to convert into? And the question says, how many grams? So I know that my final box, I'm going to be having something with grams up top. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay, can I get from millimoles to grams? Do I have any conversion factors given to me that can help me do that? Say, well, my molar mass can go from grams to moles, so that's not it. The only thing I see in the other ones given to me is millimoles to moles. Okay, so I can go from millimoles to moles and then moles to grams. So you'll notice with these cards, they're arranged where they're flip-flopped. Because remember, your conversion factors, they can be arranged either way. So for this one, 1 kilomole is equivalent or the same value as 1,000 moles. All right, the same thing is true with grams. 1 kilogram is 1,000 grams. But I can have that where the mole is on top or the mole is on bottom. And either one of those would be a correct way to write that. But since I'm trying to cancel out millimoles, I want to use the one that has millimoles on bottom because I have millimoles on top over here. So in my diagram, I'm going to write 1 millimoles. And then on the top, 1,000 moles. I have millimoles on top, millimoles on bottom. All right, you'll see how it's the same, like fish on top, fish on bottom, millimoles on top, millimoles on bottom. I'm adding the numbers that are equivalent using the things given to me. But whenever I am setting up a dimensional analysis problem, I am setting it up based solely on the units. The numbers are just coming along for the ride. Okay. So I'm in moles, but I still want to get to grams. So, okay, how can I use that? I'm going to use the molar mass. Okay, so if I have moles on top, I need to have the moles be on bottom. So it's 95.21 grams. So I'm going to put 95.21 grams per mole. So anytime you have a per, it's per 1 mole, right? If you have 5 miles per hour, that's 5 miles per 1 hour. So after per, if you want to have a number, you just put a 1. Okay, so I have set up my problem. I'm going to check it before I do any math. Millimoles on top, millimoles on bottom, moles on top, moles on bottom, grams on top. That's what I'm left with. That's what I'm trying to get to. I'm okay with that. So remember, the next step is to multiply across the top. So I'm going to get my little trusty calculator. I'm going to say, okay, 0.0056 times 1,000 times 95.21. My answer is 533.176. I'm going to round that to 0.18. Multiply across the bottom. 1 times 1 is a really happy little 1. And then I divide. 533.18 divided by 1. It's 533.18. But remember, my answer needs to have 2 things. It needs to have a number and a unit. So I'm talking about 533.18 grams. So that's what I was left with over here. So that is how you set up a problem. You let the units tell you what goes on top versus the bottom, and then put the numbers that match with it to do that last step. All right, so you can do numbers 1 and 2 for this slide. You'll finish number 2 for this slide. Don't forget the go from fish to bird using the gator. And then number 3 from the slide where you're making your own. If you haven't finished slides 1 and 2, definitely get those done. I'm going to make a video for this practice part, working a couple of these, but that probably won't be uploaded until later today. So be on the lookout for that. Okay.